Hey guys, what's up? Jadatsguru here, back again with another video, and today we're going to be covering basic tactics. So I'm going to be covering some very basic tactics so that you can get an idea of what a tactic is in chess and where you can apply it. So basically what a tactic is a combination of moves, or usually two or more, or at least after two you will see its effects, a combination of moves that should gain you some sort of advantage. So I'm going to skip forward to our first position. So I'm going to ask you guys, what do you guys think the best move is here? Okay, so if you've watched my other videos, you might say something like knight c3, developing a piece, or knight f3, developing a piece, or knight here, developing a piece, or maybe d3, preparing to activate the bishop. But actually, the best move here is what we like to call in chess a double attack. So if we notice something about black's position, is that the f7 pawn, which is this one right here, is being attacked by the bishop. See, the bishop is attacking it. And so if we add another attacker here, he would have to defend it. And we also notice that this rook here is actually hanging. See, there's nothing defending the rook, and while it looks like the only way to attack it is through this diagonal. So black has two weak spots, or two undefended spots at the moment. How can we exploit this? So the move actually is queen to f3, and we not only attack this area right here, but we also attack the queen. So if he were to allow us to take here, we would mate shortly after. Or if you were to like do something crazy and we take here, we would have mate into. See, this is mate, checkmate, the king can't go anywhere. So instead, he would have to protect this square with the knight, and we would grab the rook, and here white would be up a rook. So that's a pretty basic tactic of a double attack. So next we're going to move into another double attack. So if we look at black's position here, he has moved his bishop out early. And when you move pieces out, you also should realize what squares they leave behind. So this bishop was actually defending this pawn. So this pawn is no longer defended, right? And if we look at this pawn, it's protected by the queen and attacked by the knight. So we have two spots that if we could add another attacker to both these spots, then we would win one of them. So the move here is queen b3. And we attack this square, which is undefended, and we attack this square. So if he defends this one like this, then we'll grab this. Or if he defends the other one with this move, then we'll grab here. And this should be simply just a pawn up for white. So make sure that when you're in positions, you should check if your opponent has any loose pieces so that you might be able to exploit them through tactics. So now we're going to get into another tactic, and in chess there's a thing called pin. And so this is what we call absolute pin, because this knight cannot move no matter what. If let's say the queen was here, then that would be a relative pin, because the knight can still move, but he'll lose the queen. So the knight is just, it can't move right now. And so what is a way that we can attack this knight? Remember that usually if we attack it with a pawn, the knight could move. But now if we attack it with a pawn, the knight can't move. So the move, I'm sure many of you have guessed, is d5. Attacking the knight which cannot move. And so here he would probably develop another piece and we'd take a knight, and here would be up a knight. And the reason this tactic works is because otherwise, let's say black does this, and we do this, and he does this. Well, now this tactic actually doesn't work anymore, because black can similarly attack our piece, and we would drop our piece back, and he would move his piece. Or if we kept the pin, he could attack us again, and we'd go back, and he'd move his piece. So when you have a pin, you should try to put pressure on it. And here we won a piece by doing so. So now I'm going to get to a third tactic, and this is a pretty common tactic. So you don't always have to give check with the piece you're moving. Sometimes there's a thing where if I were to move this knight anywhere, let's say I move the knight here, it uncovers an attack towards the queen. So what is the best move that white can play here? Notice that wherever you move the knight, he can't take your knight because it's check. So the best move, some of you might have said that it takes here check. but he can just take that. And some of you might have said knight g6 check, picking up the rook. He would defend and you pick up the rook. And yes, this is simply basically up a rook for white. But there's actually a better move, which is actually to play knight c6 check, attacking the queen. And you might say, can't the queen block? But we also cover that square, and so we'd play knight takes e7 here, and this position is just simply up a queen for white. So that's a double attack. So now this is a little bit more of an advanced tactic. If we look at black's position, he has this undefended piece, and that's basically it. This undefended piece, but there's not really a way we attack either of those. But we should look at where his queen is. So his queen right here can only move along this diagonal, if we notice. All the other squares are covered. And this is another reason why in the opening you should not bring your queen out early. So what is a move we can do to take advantage of the fact that this queen can only go on this diagonal? So if you saw the move is actually bishop g5, and see the queen cannot go here, and it cannot go here anymore, and can't go here or here because of the bishop, and it cannot go here because of the pawn and the knight, and it can't take here because of the knight. That was a lot of errors, yes, but if we notice here, the queen just has no squares. Here are all the squares it can go to, but they're all covered. So here, black would have to give up the queen and would simply be up the queen. So that is trapping the queen tactic. So now we're going to get into another tactic, and this tactic is another important idea to remember. This tactic is called the skewer. So if we notice that black's king cannot move up at all, right? So if we were to give a check to it somehow, then black's king would have to move back. And if we notice, black's rook is also on the back rank. So if we give a check here, the king would move back. We can actually skewer the king to the rook, and after the king moves back, we can take the rook. Important is that you had to give this check first on a7 instead of immediately going here, because if we were to immediately go here, he would just take us. So we have to give this check, bring the king back, and then another check, winning the rook. So now I'm going to get into our final tactic, and this is a really common, or this is a really informative tactic. You might not see it immediately, and this is a bit more of an advanced tactic. That's why this will be our last tactic. And so I asked you, what is the best move for white here? Okay. So one thing we have to note is if we use our principle of the double attack, we notice that black's bishop is undefended and f7 square is also undefended. What do you think could be the move after hearing those two things? So the move actually is a stunner. It's knight takes e5. And I just said in the last thing that there's a absolute pin. This is not an absolute pin. This is a relative pin. If we were in an absolute pin, the knight could not move. So here we take, and this is one of the main differences between an absolute pin and a relative pin. Here we can actually take, even though we're giving up massive amounts of material. And you might ask, what if he just takes the queen? Well, we give check on f7. Remember, our knight now guards this f7 square. He only has one legal move. He can only move up. And we deliver knight d5 mate. See, all the squares that the king can go to are covered, and the bishop's defended. This is just a beautiful mate with 3 minor pieces. And he also may take on the knight there, but then we'd pick up the bishop, and here, if we count material, white is up a full pawn here, and he also has a major lead in development. So that's the end of today's video, guys. If you liked the video, please remember to like and subscribe, and also make sure to try to maybe go on the tactics trainer on Lichess, or just try to practice some tactics, because tactics are a very important part of the game, and being able to spot tactics can be the difference between a loss and a win sometimes. Thank you guys for watching.